What if turning 60 is not a descent toward the end, but a sacred threshold to truth? Society tells us that after 60, we're supposed to slow down, retire, and settle into a life of reflection. But Carl Jung, the brilliant mind behind analytical psychology, saw something different. To him, aging wasn't decay. It was evolution, a spiritual revolution, a moment where masks fall off and the real self begins to emerge from behind decades of survival, duty, and external roles. But here lies the paradox. Many, upon reaching this age, begin to fade spiritually. Why? Because they believe the journey is over, the body is slower, the world seems younger, and the inner voice quieter. But that's exactly when the soul starts speaking in symbols, synchronicities, and dreams, and ignoring it becomes the first quiet betrayal. Jung called this phase individuation, a sacred path of becoming whole. But this path requires one thing above all: the willingness to go inward. Without the distractions of career and children, the real battle begins, not with the world but with yourself. So the question is simple, yet profound. Is turning 60 the beginning of the end, or the start of the deepest truth you've never dared to face? Carl Jung believed that the second half of life was not about acquisition, but reconciliation. It's when the psyche demands integration, and the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves, rises to be known. After 60, the ego's grip begins to weaken. That's not failure, that's opportunity. The self, according to Jung, begins to emerge. It's no longer about who you think you are, but who you truly are beyond the roles, fears, and traumas you've inherited. This stage is not for the faint of heart. It's a spiritual rebirth wrapped in subtle signals, recurring dreams, a strange pull toward forgotten passions, or even sudden emotional breakdowns. These aren't signs of deterioration. They are the soul knocking, sometimes gently, sometimes violently. Jung taught that if you ignore these calls, you invite despair. If you listen, you open the door to a life with depth, even in old age. He often said, "What you resist persists," and in this final arc of life, resistance to the soul becomes the greatest spiritual trap. So, what if this chapter isn't your decline, but your awakening? The first major spiritual mistake after 60, silencing the call of the soul. Many people, out of habit or fear, begin to detach from their inner world. They stop asking questions, stop following curiosity, and settle into a rhythm that numbs rather than nourishes. They may look peaceful on the outside, but inside, a silent war rages, a battle between routine and revelation. Jung believed that the soul never stops evolving, and when you ignore it, it rebels through dreams, depression, and a subtle sense of wrongness that can't be named. You feel lost, even if everything appears fine. This mistake is insidious because it looks like acceptance, but it's resignation. And that resignation is spiritual death. But here's the truth no one tells you. The soul is patient. Even after decades of silence, it waits. It speaks in symbols, memories, synchronicities. The question is, are you still listening? Ignoring the inner call is like ignoring a knock at your door in the middle of the night. You don't know what stands on the other side, but you feel its presence, always. What happens when your dreams go silent? There comes a moment, usually unnoticed, when the nights become quiet, not with peace, but with absence. The dreams that once brought cryptic wisdom, emotions, and forgotten symbols now fade into forgettable sleep. For Carl Jung, this wasn't just a sign of aging, it was a sign of spiritual starvation. Dreams, he believed, are the voice of the soul. They are not random, they are messages, coded in metaphor, born in the unconscious. When they vanish or become dull, it's not because the psyche has nothing more to say, it's because you've stopped listening. After 60, most people turn outward, toward comforts, routines, distractions. The inner world, rich and wild, becomes neglected terrain. But the soul doesn't vanish, it retreats, like a forgotten child waiting behind closed doors. And here's the danger. In this silence, people mistake numbness for contentment. They assume the quiet means they've reached inner peace. But Jung warned of a spiritual phenomenon more dangerous than chaos: stagnation. A soul ignored too long doesn't scream, it disappears. And with it, so does your sense of aliveness. Ask yourself, when was the last time a dream stirred you? Do you remember it? Did you write it down, explore its message, reflect on its meaning? Or did you brush it aside as nonsense? In Jungian psychology, dreams are sacred. Losing them is not aging, it's amnesia of the soul, but the silence can be broken. Begin by honoring the night again. Keep a journal by your bed. Ask your unconscious to speak, reflect, interpret, meditate. Because when the dreams return, so does your deepest self. There's a common story told after 60 that life is now for others. Children, grandchildren, obligations. A life of service, support, and simplicity. But Jung would say, beware the mask of duty that hides the death of the self. The second great spiritual mistake is this: living for everyone else and forgetting your own becoming. This is not about selfishness, it's about individuation, the process of becoming whole. If you've spent your whole life shaping yourself to fit roles, meet expectations, fulfill duties, then after 60 is your sacred moment to finally ask, what do I want? Who am I when no one is watching? Jung taught that the second half of life demands a reckoning. The ego, shaped by decades of pleasing and proving, must face its mirror. And what many find there is a stranger, a soul unfulfilled, an identity borrowed. It's not enough to be a good grandparent, a patient spouse, or a wise elder. The soul doesn't care for titles. It wants truth. But here's the catch. When you begin living for yourself, following art, solitude, inner reflection, you may face guilt. You may feel selfish. Conditioned responses from decades of social expectation will whisper, "Isn't this wrong?" That voice is not your soul. That's the ghost of duty. You were not meant to vanish into the background of others' lives. You were meant to blaze one final trail, not outward, but inward. The journey is not toward legacy. It's toward authenticity. Because if you don't live your truth now, when will you? Everyone has a shadow. But after 60, if you haven't faced it, it begins to live for you. The shadow, in Jungian psychology, is the dark side of the psyche. Not evil, but repressed. It's the hurt, rage, envy, regret, lust, and sorrow you've buried to survive. Most people never face it. They ignore it, rationalize it, or worse, project it onto others. But here's the truth Jung uncovered. The longer the shadow is ignored, the stronger it becomes. After 60, the conscious defenses weaken, the past resurfaces, old wounds echo louder. If unresolved, these shadows begin to hijack behavior. You've seen it. The bitter elder, the jealous retiree, the manipulative parent. This isn't just how they are. It's shadow possession. The tragedy, these people don't even realize it. They believe they're still in control. But if your emotions feel disproportionate, if anger erupts without cause, if resentment lingers longer than it should, your shadow may be speaking. Facing the shadow is not a luxury, it's a necessity, especially after 60, when you finally have the time, the space, and the psychological maturity to confront it. Start by observing your triggers. Reflect on the people who irritate you. Why? They are often mirrors of your denied parts. Then gently, without judgment, begin to integrate. Talk, write, seek therapy, meditate, accept, because the shadow isn't here to destroy you, it's here to complete you. And until you face it, you'll never truly know who you are in the light. One of the most dangerous illusions that emerge after 60 is the appearance of peace. On the surface, life seems quiet. The major battles are over. There's time to rest, time to reflect. But under this stillness, something sinister can fester: complacency. A subtle spiritual paralysis disguised as acceptance. Carl Jung warned against this exact phenomenon. He saw the second half of life not as a place of rest, but of inner confrontation, a time when the deeper layers of the psyche rise and beg to be seen. Yet so many numb this call with comfort. TV, routine, habits, distractions, masters, hobbies. The danger? You begin to believe the work is done, that growth is no longer necessary, that wisdom is automatic. But the soul doesn't stop growing, and when it's ignored, it atrophies. Jung believed the psyche is always in motion. The self seeks expression until your final breath. And if you settle too soon, you build your own cage made of routine, nostalgia, and the fear of change. So, how do you tell the difference between true peace and toxic complacency? Ask yourself, when was the last time you felt spiritually uncomfortable? When was the last time you changed a belief, admitted an old mistake, or confronted a forgotten part of yourself? If you can't remember, you may not be at peace, you may be stuck. And the tragedy? Most people confuse this stagnation with wisdom. They mistake stillness for serenity, when in truth, it's surrender. But here's the secret Jung left us. The soul doesn't want comfort, it wants completion. Perhaps the most seductive lie we tell ourselves after 60 is this: it's too late. Too late to start over. Too late to change. Too late to heal. Carl Jung would argue the opposite. He believed the most profound psychological transformations happen precisely in the second half of life, when the ego has loosened, when identity is more fluid, and when mortality makes truth urgent. But the mistake many make is this: they treat their story as already written, as if the arc is complete, and now all that's left is reflection or regret. They turn away from new adventures, new learnings, new spiritual insights, not because they can't, but because they believe they shouldn't. This belief is a quiet death, and it seeps into the soul like fog. You've seen it. The person who stops dreaming, stops creating, stops risking, not because they lack ability, but because they bought the myth of finality. Yet some of the greatest transformations recorded in history, spiritual awakenings, artistic rebirths, radical forgiveness, have occurred in people past 60, 70, even 80. Because when death becomes visible on the horizon, life finally becomes real. Jung wrote, "The afternoon of life must have a different meaning than the morning. It's not about repeating what you've done, it's about becoming what you've never dared to be." So ask yourself, what dream have you buried under the excuse of time? What truth still waits for your voice? It's not too late. In fact, the timing may finally be perfect. Curiosity is the fuel of the soul. Without it, even the most enlightened spirit begins to wither. After 60, many people unconsciously close the door to mystery. They stop asking questions. They no longer explore new philosophies, read challenging ideas, or investigate the symbols that rise from within. The mind rests, but the unconscious, it never stops moving. Jung knew that curiosity was not just a mental exercise, it was a spiritual imperative. The unconscious is not a stagnant pool, it is a living ocean. And when we stop diving into it, we lose contact with what makes life rich, strange, and sacred. So why do people abandon curiosity? Because it threatens the illusion of certainty. Curiosity asks you to let go of control, to dance with the unknown. And after decades of building stability, control becomes a comfort, one people rarely surrender. But here's the paradox. The more you cling to what you know, the more you lose touch with who you are. To Jung, the unconscious was not the enemy. It was the hidden map of your becoming. Through dreams, art, synchronicities, and archetypes, it speaks endlessly, but only to those still listening. If you stop being curious, you stop evolving, and the soul begins to rot in a cage of answers it never asked for. So reignite the question, what don't I know about myself? What lies beyond the next dream, the next insight, the next mirror? Because curiosity isn't just for the young, it's the fire that keeps the old alive. Time is the most merciless mirror, and after 60, it reflects not only the past lived, but the parts of yourself that were never born. Carl Jung understood this pain. In his later years, he wrote about how the unlived life haunts us, how the parts we denied, ignored, or sacrificed begin to knock louder and louder on the doors of consciousness. These are not just regrets, they are archetypes unfulfilled, the artist who never painted, the explorer who never left home, the lover who never spoke their truth. These aren't just what-ifs, they are soul fragments, and Jung's message was clear. If you do not integrate them, they become phantoms. They manifest as sadness, restlessness, bitterness, and the quiet dread of meaninglessness. This is why so many people after 60 feel a strange emptiness even when their lives seem full. The family is healthy, the career is over, the retirement is stable, but something aches, something that can't be explained. That ache is the cry of the archetypes left behind. To Jung, archetypes were not myths. They were living blueprints in the psyche, forces that push us toward wholeness. Ignore them and they distort. Embrace them and you become more than you were. So the question is brutal but necessary. What parts of you have you never lived? And more importantly, can you still live them now, before it's too late? Because redemption is not in the past. It's in the courage to still become. Have you ever had a strange coincidence, so precise, so meaningful, it felt like the universe was speaking directly to you? Carl Jung called these moments synchronicities, not random, not chance, but spiritual signals. Mysterious connections between inner and outer worlds, pointing towards something you need to see. And after 60, these signals often increase, but tragically most people stop paying attention. The reason? They've stopped believing life can still surprise them. Yet Jung believed these. Synchronicities are the soul's last attempt to wake you up. A phone call at the exact moment of a thought, a song with lyrics that match your secret pain, a stranger's words echoing a dream. These are not accidents. They are messages from the self, from the unconscious, from something ancient and sacred. But in the noise of modern life, even in retirement, we drown them out. We call them coincidences. We move on. And in doing so, we reject the invitation. Because every synchronicity is a door. And behind it, a truth you've been avoiding. A task unfinished, a conversation your soul is begging to have with you. The tragedy is not that these signs vanish, it's that we stop answering. But it's never too late. Start paying attention, keep a synchronicity journal, trust your intuition, follow the threads no matter how small, because sometimes the soul only speaks once more, and if you ignore it, the silence that follows is permanent. What if your dreams are not just stories, but sacred? Messages from the divine within. Even after 60, even after decades of rational thought and emotional exhaustion, the dreams never truly stop. They become quieter, more symbolic, more patient, but they're still there, waiting. Carl Jung spent his life decoding the sacred language of dreams. He believed that every symbol was a doorway, every figure a guide, every nightmare, a message. And after 60, these dreams carry an urgency, not to teach, but to remind. They remind you of what you've forgotten, of who you still are, of what remains unfinished. And the older you get, the more important they become. Because dreams are the final dialogue between your conscious self and the eternal self, the part of you that doesn't age, doesn't forget, doesn't die. Have you been dreaming of water, of forgotten homes, of faces you no longer know? These aren't meaningless echoes. They're the whispers of a soul asking, will you listen to me one last time? Jung taught that ignoring your dreams was like ignoring God speaking through metaphor. They are not random, they are revelation. Start writing them down, study their patterns, meditate on their symbols, because in them you'll find the map to your final transformation, not to someone new, but to someone whole. And if you truly listen, you might realize that your spirit has been speaking all along. Not all who wander are lost, but many who stop wandering become lost in silence. Carl Jung believed that every human being carries within a deep need for renewal, not once, but many times throughout life. And perhaps the most powerful of all these renewals must happen after 60, a time when most believe change is behind them, not ahead. But this is when the real initiation begins. You've walked through decades of identity, parent, professional, citizen, caretaker. These were necessary, sacred roles. But now, the soul whispers a different invitation, to become yourself, and that requires a ritual of rebirth. In ancient cultures, rites of passage marked the beginning of adulthood. But what about the beginning of true wisdom? What about the moment where the ego dissolves and the soul demands emergence? That's what's needed now. Jung believed these rites don't require temples or priests. They require intention, they require courage, they require a willingness to symbolically die, to let go of who you've been and step into the unknown of who you might still become. So, what does this ritual look like today? It could be as simple as retreat, a weekend in silence, a personal pilgrimage, burning old journals, starting a new practice. It's not about theatrics, it's about significance. It's about telling your unconscious, I'm ready to live again, for real this time. Because even at 60, 70, 80, the journey is not over. The soul is still unfolding, but it needs your permission to rise. Redemption is a word we often associate with religion or sin, but Carl Jung saw it differently. For him, redemption was psychological wholeness. It was the integration of all the parts of you that you've left behind. The wounded child, the silenced artist, the angry rebel, the forgotten dreamer. And after 60, the final opportunity for this integration begins. Not because you are out of time, but because now you finally understand what matters. This is the final mistake many make, believing that healing is for the young, that the traumas are already fossilized, that the past can't be changed. But redemption isn't about changing the past. It's about changing your relationship to it. Jung often said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Redemption, then, is reclaiming fate, transforming old pain into new wisdom. You may never erase what happened, but you can give it new meaning. You can speak truths never spoken. You can forgive what was unforgivable, not for others, but for your freedom. This is the great work of the soul, to be whole before you die. And this is your chance. Here's the paradox Jung left us with. The truest life begins when we think it's over, when the children are grown, when the career has faded, when the body slows and the world moves on. That's when the self finally knocks, and most miss it, because they're mourning the life behind them. But what if you looked forward, not back? What if you believed that your truest purpose was not what you've already done, but what you're about to become? Jung called this the second birth, a birth not of flesh, but of soul. A moment when you stop playing roles and start living truth. This life doesn't ask for fame or legacy. It asks for authenticity. It asks for presence. It asks that you bring all your pain, wisdom, memories and dreams, and finally sit in the fire of your being unafraid. Because this is where eternity begins, not after death, but in the moment you stop hiding from yourself. So the question is not, what's left to do? The question is, who am I willing to become even now? The end is not the end. It is the beginning of the only life that ever truly mattered. After everything we've explored together, after diving deep into the psychology of the soul, the hidden errors of aging, the spiritual wounds left untreated, and the incredible potential for rebirth even after 60, it's time to breathe, to pause, to take all of this, not just as information, but as invitation. Because everything we've spoken about here isn't just about knowledge, it's about you. Yes, you, the person on the other side of this screen. The one whose eyes may be wet right now, the one who's been nodding silently, recognizing something deep and unspoken in the words. Maybe it stirred something in you. Maybe it's discomfort. Maybe it's relief. Maybe it's a strange mix of both. That's not a coincidence. That is the soul responding to truth. We spoke of Jung, of the second half of life, of the call that never stops coming. But there is a call greater than all, a call not only from within, but from above. And I want to speak now, not as a narrator, not as a voice in a video, but as a fellow traveler in this life. I want to speak to the part of you that's tired, the part that's seen things, that's survived grief, disappointment, and silence. The part of you that maybe once believed and then doubted, or the part that never believed at all but always wondered, could there be more? Let me share with you something very old and very simple. It's one sentence, and it's changed lives for over 2,000 years. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. John 3:16. Maybe you've heard it before. Maybe you've memorized it in Sunday school. Or maybe you've never heard those words in your life. Either way, let me tell you, they are not words of religion. They are not rules. They are not demands. They are a love letter, a message to you, wherever you are right now. Whatever age, whatever past, whatever pain, this verse is the echo of something you felt your whole life but maybe never named, the longing to be known, fully and still loved. And the truth is, you are. God's love is not transactional. It does not depend on what you've done or failed to do. It's not only for the young or the righteous. It's not reserved for the perfect. It's offered to all. To the woman who's buried 3 friends this year and wakes up feeling hollow. To the man who thinks his best years are behind him. To the person who has spent a lifetime chasing peace and never quite finding it. It's offered to you, and here's the part that might surprise you. God's love does not begin when you believe. It's already there, right now. It's been there your whole life, through every season, through every loss, through every silent cry at night. He was there when you were young and afraid. He was there when you made mistakes. He was there when you were forgotten, and he's still here, now. Jesus Christ is not just a historical figure. He's not just a name whispered in churches. He's a living presence, the embodiment of God's love. And the reason he came was simple: to heal what we could not heal ourselves, to reach the parts of us too broken, too ashamed, too lost, to die, yes, but more importantly, to live again and invite you into that eternal life with him. Maybe you're thinking, but I've made too many mistakes. Let me stop you there. There's nothing you've done that can keep you from his love, not one thing. The cross wasn't for the good, it was for the guilty, for the tired, for the ones who've tried everything else and still come up empty. This moment, right here, could be the turning point of your life. We've talked so much about Jung and the shadow, about confronting what we've hidden, about listening to the soul. But what if your soul is crying out not just for integration, but for salvation? This is not about religion. This is about relationship, a sacred connection between you and your Creator. And he's not asking you to earn it. He's asking you to receive it. If your heart is stirring right now, that's not emotion. That's the Spirit of God reaching out to you, whispering that you were never forgotten, that this video isn't just content, it's a calling. So here's what I invite you to do right now, wherever you are. Just pause, close your eyes, and if your heart is open, say something like this: God, I don't have all the answers. I've made mistakes. I've carried pain. But today, I open my heart. I believe you love me. I believe you sent Jesus for me. I receive your love. I want to walk with you. I want a new beginning. Amen. There's no magic in the words. The power is in the heart behind them. And if you've prayed something like that, if you've said yes to Jesus, then I welcome you, not to a religion, but to a family, a journey, a healing that is both eternal and now. You may still have questions. That's okay. God isn't afraid of your doubts. He invites them. What matters is the openness, the willingness, and maybe, just maybe, this was the day it all began. Now, before you go, I want to thank you for staying with me through this journey, for being open to these truths. I know it wasn't easy. I know some parts were painful, but I hope, more than anything, that it was worth it. If this message touched you, if this video stirred something in your heart, I humbly ask you to do 3 things. Like this video, not for vanity, but so it can reach someone else who needs it just like you did. Subscribe to this channel. We're building a space for truth seekers, for souls on the edge of transformation, for people who believe life is deeper than what we see. And share this video with one person, just one. Someone who might need a gentle whisper of hope in their day. You're not alone, friend. You never were, and you never will be. We're here. We're walking this path with you, one step at a time. And more importantly, God is with you, always. No matter how late it feels, no matter what's behind you, the road ahead is sacred. And as Jung might say, the path you're meant to walk is the one that rises up to meet your soul the moment you take the first step. Take it and let love, real, eternal, divine love, carry you the rest of the way. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay curious, stay brave, and stay open to the light. God bless you.